Hello. Thank you for joining this recorded teleconference session in the Chapter Leadership Series. My name is Rob France, VP Chapter Support Leadership Training for Mid-Atlantic District. This is one of the features of MAD Leadership Academy, which intends to connect MAD chapter leaders together in periodic teleconferences. In addition, Leadership Academy content will include enhanced online courses and in-person sessions at Harmony College East. This recording is from the first ever MAD Town Hall meeting held on 9th of February 2020. You see on the agenda that today's session will focus on the roles of Chapter President, Secretary, and Treasurer. We have some prepared presentations as well as interactive discussion at the end. The content is similar to that of the Leadership Academy combined sessions. The interactive Q&A portion is included because there were some excellent clarifying points made. Even though the teleconference session is concluded, if you have questions or comments, please send an email to robfrance@francearoo@gmail.com. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Doug Brown, Chris Beekler, and John Santora for today's topics. Doug Brown, please go ahead with Chapter President.
Will do. Good evening, everybody. I've kind of taken my segment into three areas, as you can see. Leadership roles that the president plays, management the president plays, and ultimately copyright matters. In terms of the leadership role, when I'm doing the Leadership Academy for Presidents, one of the things that I always kind of talk to them about is you have a role as chief visionary. And that's really to determine what is it that your chapter is actually aspiring to. Do you see your role as basically just keeping the lights on for another year? Or do you see yourself creating an environment that's really aspirational, that really gives the chapter something to live into in terms of what they can really do for the betterment of the chapter? And that typically also starts to go into the wider community as well. Another role that you play as chapter president is really cheerleader. To the point that Rob just made, how do we encourage people to be able to get more out of the hobby, to be able to get more in, to be able to be contributing members of our chapter, but just as importantly, to be another element of motivation that hopefully your musical director is as well, to really keep people feeling good about what they're doing, about celebrating successes, about being willing to be able to try things and kind of fail forward, if you will, because not everything that we try is going to work flawlessly first time. But how do we keep that encouraging environment so that we really get the momentum? And then next is the servant leadership piece. And since that's not always understood by everybody, let me make sure that you have context for it. That in a typical organizational chart or organization that's set up like this, it's not unusual for both power and communication to kind of flow from the top down. And that's been pretty typical in terms of the way organizations have operated for years and years. But my challenge is, when we operate that way, where are our customers? And typically our customers are down here. Now, in a barbershop realm, our customers are not only the folks that are paying for tickets or for our singing Valentines, but our customers are also the men and women that are on the risers. And so when we start to think about if the purpose of every organization is to attract and keep satisfied customers. And again, I'd like you to think about internal customers as well as external customers. What are we really doing to make sure that we're providing outstanding customer service, both inside as well as outside? The easiest way to do that is to adopt the idea of servant leadership, that by putting our customers on the top, the individual folks that work in an organization, their job is to be able to keep their customers satisfied. In this particular model, the supervisor's job is to help the individual contributors get and keep satisfied customers. The middle managers are help the organization stay out of the way of the people who are trying to help individual contributors get and keep customers. And the job of the executives is really kind of to make sure all of those things are staying in place. When I translate that into a barbershop arena, you really have, if these two levels here are really the folks that are standing on the risers, what are the job of the section leaders to be able to make sure that the individual singers can do an outstanding job of getting that musical message out to the audience? But just as importantly, what are they doing to make sure that the rehearsals are satisfying and fun? If you think about this as is the various program people and so on in the chapter, their job is to make sure that all the tools and so on are in place to be able to help people sing better and so on. All the craft, all of the performance, all of the administrative kind of things are not getting in the way of somebody having a great experience in your chapter. And really your role as the president, secretary, and treasurer, and here I'm really talking to the presidents specifically, is to ensure that that's really happening. In terms of the management role, we almost have to think about it as being the equivalent of a chief executive officer in an organization, and really making sure that all the functions are really kind of interwoven, if you will. In addition to that, because of the size organization that most of us have, we really have a lot of day in and day out responsibility as well. And so that I just kind of refer to that as follow-upper in chief. That it's, once we know that officers are kind of been assigned their task and we have our work plan laid out on an annual basis, what are we doing to provide adequate follow-up so that those plans are actually going to get done? And we can help ourselves if we start to think in terms of both bench strength. Who do we have that are backups to those positions, so that if somebody gets sick or moves out of the area or is on vacation, that we really have a backup, which leads me to my next point here in terms of no single point of failure. One of the scariest things that happened in my own chapter several years ago is we had a well-meaning volunteer who would literally do everything and anything. And quite candidly, they were almost allergic to delegation. And they were taking on the show and writing the script and being the producer and doing the ad book and all these kinds of things, which sounds wonderful, except 2 weeks before the annual show, this person got sick. And because they had everything in their head, nobody had any information to go on. And we almost lost if it wasn't for some Herculean efforts, we would have almost lost our biggest show revenue production for the year, which then kind of got me into, okay, so why don't more people delegate? There's really two issues to that. One, there's an attitudinal issue that people are reluctant to ask people for help. And sometimes there's also a skills piece that people don't know how to ask people for help. So, and they're so afraid that, well, if somebody does something and then drop the ball, I've been burned. God, it's just easier if I do it myself. And then with that, I'm going to share an acronym that was once shared with me from Digger McDougall when we were working together on the Society's Leadership Task Force. He had been a chief psychologist for the Canadian military. And the acronym is Ask Art. If you know what someone's attitudes and skills and knowledge are, you know what activity, roles, and tasks you can give them that they will succeed. The other thing that I find just exasperating in our hobby in general is most people set up jobs that a mere mortal cannot do and have a life. So it's almost like, do I want to be a great president or vice president or whatever? But we create such large functions that we almost make it impossible to win or to be able to do it and still being able to treat it as a hobby. So one of the things that I'm going to show you here in a minute is how can you start to salami slice up jobs so that they're small enough that you can get people to say yes, and they're going to be in a position to be able to actually do that work. The next piece is clear processes. And I'm going to walk you through two examples of that. I'm not going to dwell on it, but oftentimes people say, well, this all sounds good, but what does that look like? So this particular year, I happened to be a membership vice president for my organization. And so kind of laying this out, I've thought about, okay, who's on the promotional end in terms of bringing in guests and so on, who's on the prospector or the prospective membership team, and all of these items that you see in front of them all have different names associated with them or multiple names associated with them. And then once somebody does become a member, down here we have all of the cultural and onboarding and retention pieces that are so important to us, including because of the culture of our particular organization, making sure that the afterglow experience is a good one, both on a weekly basis as well as we're in competition. So that's just a quick example of how you can take a function and be able to slice it up into little pieces that make it easy to say yes. The other thing I referred to was kind of clear processes. Here's our process for how we bring in somebody from the time that they first say, yep, I might be interested in stopping by and see what you guys do, all the way down to them beginning a member. I'm sharing this with you because in any organization, people want to understand, am I dealing with a well-run organization, or is it kind of flying by the seat of their pants and everybody's kind of making stuff up as they go? So having clear processes to be able to kind of map, where are we, what else is needed, who's responsible to do what by when, can also make it easy for people to say yes and say, yep, I can't do everything, but I can do this for you. I find that when those things are really loosey-goosey and amorphous, it really makes it hard on everybody. Nobody knows where a role stops and starts and where the handoffs are, and it's way too easy to have those balls dropped. The last section of my segment with you here this afternoon or this evening is going to be on copyright. So there's several pieces of that. One of the things that you see on the screen in front of you is, where do you go to get information on copyright? And this is right off of our own Barbershop Harmony Society website, but it really kind of speaks to kind of, what have I bought? How do we handle buying sheet music, for example, versus digital music versus learning tracks? And what do I need to be concerned with in terms of performance and so on? I captured a couple of items that I just thought were worth highlighting here. Regarding live performance rights, they're typically licensed through Ascap or BMI or CSAC if we happen to be on the Canadian side. But the whole idea in mind is we do have, as a president, we do have a responsibility, and I'm sure Chris and John are going to talk about this as well, to make sure that all those things get reported to Mid-Atlantic District, so all the record keeping is done, and yep, we are in fact staying on the side of the angels. All the copyright matters from an audio perspective, including securing the mechanical rights of being able to reproduce. And this is whether we make a physical learning track or whether we make a digital learning track. Both of those still apply. And there's your information in terms of being able to how to be able to secure that. And then last but not least, anytime we're doing something on video, whether it be as you can see there, a DVD, so to speak, or an MP4 download, all of those require synchronization licenses. So even if you've gotten the permission and you have the music and you have the learning tracks, if you record that and post it to a website or something along those lines, that's when you have to make sure that you've got the synchronization licenses in place. When it comes to those recordings that are being done at district or international level, those are being done through a YouTube agreement that's already been worked out. But what I'm really talking about, what I'm highlighting here, is if you decide to do something as a chapter and you want to stay on the right side of the law, those are the things that we have to pay attention to. So that's my segment. Let me go ahead and turn it over to Chris for the secretary's piece.
Thank you very much, Doug.
Hello, folks. I'm going to cover some issues that I've seen around the district and around the society on things that, well, everybody understands it. You know, we've been doing the same things for years. We had Aptify, then we went to Member Center. It took a while to adjust, but I find a lot of people are not really using some of the advantages of Member Center. Checking into your own chapter regularly to see what's there, like your chapter roster. Or we made a conversion from sending out these printed reports on payouts. So we're used to sending in the IRS reports and the financial audits and your incorporation status, but is your treasurer or secretary downloading the payouts to match them against the records as far as your member renewals? Another thing that's changed significantly in the last year, we're updating leaders. Everybody goes in and say, well, I'm updated my leaders here. Well, what happened last year that was very significant? The chapter and chorus were split. So what's happening is a number of people are going in, they're updating their 2020, and they're going, well, I don't have a chorus manager here, so I'll just create one. And you go to add a leader. And they do look at down up here, and they don't find a chorus manager or chorus director, so we just create one. You throw in a chorus manager title, you start them, and you put in the person's name, and you're all happy. Does that work? Anybody want to answer that?
I'm guessing no.
Thank you very much. Right. Where people are getting confused with the new system is going back to your chapter and then distinguishing your chorus. So you've got leaders here for the chapter, and you've got the chorus. In some cases, chapters have multiple choruses. But we pick a chorus, and the chapter secretary or president or treasurer needs to go in and update the leaders for the chorus. That's a significant change. A lot of folks complain, well, it's just not working. Well, Member Center is working fine. But if you don't update the chorus manager or chorus director, you're not going to be able to do a contest entry in BarberScore. We've been using BarberScore for the last several cycles. It's working as far as entering contests, but individuals who are not chorus managers or not the chorus director do not have rights there. It's also important that those individuals remember to use the email they have registered at Member Center. Some people have multiple emails, and they'll try to use another email. It only works with the one you've got registered in Member Center. If you have any issue entering a contest, contact customer service. They've been given a lot of new tools and instructions on how to get you access and entered into a new contest. I know a lot of choruses do not necessarily compete, but the ones that do have been having some issues getting in because they're not updating their records and not using the proper email. Major change last December 1st. And this has really impacted a number of chapters. For years, we've been going along, and if somebody didn't renew their membership, they had 6 months, pay $3 late fee. Wow, I could just go ahead and join again. You know, I can renew. Well, that went away on 1 December. Now they only have 30 days. So if you go to your chapter roster and you look at dues paid through, you only have a couple of people who were lapsed. Hopefully not too many. The key thing is reminding them to do this, because they will not get hammered over and over by headquarters as far as renewing. They're given a notice. They don't renew on time, take advantage of the discounts for renewing on time and online. They're put into the pink category of lapsed, and they only have 30 days. At the end of those 30 days, they're dropped. They're moved into the expired category. And if they're moved into the expired category, they have to reapply, pay the $10 readmission fee plus the dues, and be voted on by your chapter board. So it's really important that your chapter secretary and your membership vice president stay in touch with anybody who goes into a lapse status, because they're only going to be there for a limited amount of time, allowing them to renew. Show clearances. Nothing significantly has changed except some difficulty in actually following the instructions. Here, I'm the assistant secretary for the district for clearances. And if you go to the Mid-Atlantic website, I think the instructions are fairly clear to send 3 copies, and please send it well before your show. Usually you don't know 2 days before your show that you're going to have it. Yet I still get emails and phone calls going, can you clear my show really quickly? Submit the form. The $28 hasn't gone up in years, but submit 3 copies of the form, mail it to me. I'll send it back as soon as I receive it. That's all we ask. It's difficult with the number of chapters we have in the district to try to make copies for everybody. So that's why we ask that you submit the 3. Same thing with the Ascap form. There's instructions here. The Ascap form you only have to do once a year. That hasn't changed. This year I did write the fillable form for headquarters. It's online. You can find it by looking at just Ascap on the BHS site. And you fill in each individual cell, save it, send it in with your check. If you actually owe any money for producing shows. If you don't, you can email a copy, and you should email a copy to me also, or mail it to me along with a BMI. We ask that so we can match records. So please follow the instructions that are on the district website. Board minutes. Nothing particularly new here except the change in Standard Society bylaws, which for years required a monthly board meeting. They're no longer required. Quarterly is sufficient. But I still find a lot of chapters have trouble preparing an agenda and then following that agenda to have efficient meetings. And your incorporation status. If you go to the Mid-Atlantic site, under Documents and Information, Nonprofit Registration and Compliance. Information here for all the jurisdictions in the Mid-Atlantic. Wrote this last year, and I think it's up to date. I'll check it again this year, but this gives you all the links to go to for whatever jurisdiction you're incorporated in. But make sure you do that, because they are not any more willing to cut you a break with the state than they were in the past. Okay, I'll turn this over to John now.
Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I am going to talk about these 5 topics, and it'll be an abbreviated version, and talking about the interaction mostly between the secretaries, treasurers, and presidents in relation to each of these topics. Obviously, in the treasurer's class, we go into much more detail on each of these. In terms of financial reports, the reports needed on an ongoing basis are the income statement and the balance sheet. Now, an income statement can either be detailed or it can be condensed. A detailed income statement shows every single account in the chart of accounts with activity and sometimes even shows a transaction register of all the individual transactions in those accounts. That's what the treasurer needs, and that's what the person who does the financial review needs, but it's not what the board needs, and it's not what outside people like a grant application would need. So I make a distinction between using condensed reports for the monthly or quarterly board meetings, and that takes a lot of the time and effort away from explaining very small transactions that often get questioned at board meetings. So presidents work with your treasurers to make sure that they're giving useful but not too detailed information to the board on a timely basis. Because we're cash basis accounting, the balance sheet is essentially the amount of money you have in your bank account or investment accounts. And that doesn't need to be shown as a separate statement. That can be shown simply at the bottom of the income statement. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about restricted and unrestricted funds in the next part of this presentation, but you don't really need to show the separation between restricted and restricted for these monthly and quarterly reports. It becomes important at the end of the year to make sure that you're in compliance with the IRS requirements on that, but it's not something that needs to be stressed and re-explained at every board meeting. As far as budgeting is concerned, this is an area where the treasurer and the president really need to work together on, because treasurers don't prepare budgets. Treasurers compile budgets, and they get that information from the people with the individual responsibilities. As Doug was talking about before, that membership person would be responsible for providing the treasurer with all sorts of information: how many guest nights we're going to have, how many, how the afterglows are going to be run after the meetings, all sorts of membership type of information that has financial implications. The treasurer gathers that information from all of the functional areas: how many pieces of music they're going to buy, whether or not you're going to compete, whether you're going to have outside coaching. All that kind of information doesn't come from the treasurer. It comes from the people who are actually in charge of those areas. So that's an important distinction, and the president can help the treasurer enforce that, and you'll have a better budget as a result of that. Now, when you do gather and prepare that information, the treasurers will often find that there is an expectation to be able to spend a lot more money than you bring in. So what you need to do is you need to work with the president and treasurer to prioritize what expenditures are the most important, so that you can balance your budget if that's what the board is committed to do, and then work toward that in the board meeting, where they will look at the priorities, and the board may decide to change the priorities, but at least you've given them the reasoning as to why you believe it should be the approach to take. And then the board approves the budget. And hopefully all this happens before the year starts, but in many cases, the budgets are approved in the first meeting of the year. It shouldn't be much further than that, because you want to have a good idea of where you're going before you actually start on the journey. An important thing to understand, too, is that once you have an approved budget, when you're spending money in line with what's already been approved with the budget, it doesn't require any additional approval to do that. The treasurer is authorized to do that because of the budget. In terms of grant applications, this is often an overlooked source of funds for many chapters, especially for major one-time projects. Things like buying risers, buying new uniforms, support for a youth camp, things that are new and things that are a one-time type of activity. at least in terms of the grant application. The treasurer's role for this is to review any financial data requirements that may be part of the grant application and to provide that information to whoever is filling out the grant application. But another important aspect of this for both the president, secretary, and treasurer when you're filling out a grant application is to make sure that you review the potential donor's mission and ensure that your application is aligned with their mission, not with your chapter's mission. The easiest way to get a grant application denied is not to understand what the donor organization's mission is and aligning your request to their mission. Financial reviews are an important topic, and the thing that I always stress on this is not an audit. You don't have to engage a CPA to do this. It's a very easy process that is actually detailed on the Barbershop Harmony Society website, how to conduct a financial review. Just search for financial review and you'll see a couple of documents related to that. And it can be done by anyone other than a person who was on the board during the year under review. So it could be a former treasurer, it could be another chapter member who is conversant in financial matters. It can be another chapter's treasurer. You can swap and do each other's financial reviews. So that's those are the possibilities, and as I said, it's an important aspect, especially for treasurers who are in the job for a long period of time. It's not that we're suggesting that treasurers make mistakes or get comfortable in their jobs, but it's just there's sometimes in the financial review you'll have suggestions made. Why are you doing things this way? Or did you realize that you could save yourself a lot of time and effort if you just did Y instead of X? So those outside reviews can be particularly helpful in terms of the workflow. The source and use of funds, the restricted or operating funds, there's a very detailed discussion of this in the Treasurer's Manual. And we go through it in great detail in the treasurer's class, but I think the important thing to understand from the president, secretary, and treasurer's perspective is that restricted funds come from the general public. Things like show tickets, grants, program ads, and whatever, and they can only be used for the mission of the chapter. You can buy sheet music, pay for your rehearsal space, pay for coaching, travel to competitions, all those kinds of things, but it has to be related to the musical and educational aspects of the IRS restrictions. Unrestricted funds come from members. These are dues, certain donations, private afterglow things, Christmas parties or whatever. And they can be used for a variety of different things. The very important consideration, though, two important considerations: they cannot be used, no funds of the chapter, whether they're restricted or unrestricted, can be used for the benefit of a single member. So you can't have, because someone loses his job, you can't have the chapter pay their dues for them or pay their travel costs to go to a competition. Now, one of the ways that you can sort of work around this is to create a defined class of members. For example, you can have all the members who are performing at a contest, even though, so that let's say you have a chapter that has a roster of 75 people, but only 40 are competing. Those 40 people could be eligible for a stipend to attend the convention, but you have to make that allowance available to every single person who is part of that class. So that's something that works, and that can actually be both restricted and unrestricted if it works for something like a competition or an educational event. You can actually pay for those things out of restricted funds if they advance the purposes of the chapter. But this defined class of members is an important consideration. And finally, the really important consideration is that chapter funds no matter the source, cannot be used for a purpose that's totally outside of the chapter's mission. And the classic example of this is that the chapter may be asked to produce and perform on a show for specific disaster victims, whether it's a local fire, a hurricane, whatever, and then have the chapter send the proceeds directly to whatever organization is providing that relief. That's totally outside the concept of our IRS exemptions and is not allowed. You can certainly perform on such a show for free, and knowing that the proceeds from that show, whoever is organizing it, would then go to those victims. But the chapter itself cannot produce the show and have the money flow through the chapter. And with that, my part of the presentation is done, and I will turn it back to Rob.
Are there any, first of all, in the gallery, are there any questions that you have for Doug? Actually, to open it up to anybody. Now would be your time.
This is Skip Adams. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. At our last board meeting, I'm the newest secretary of the Westchester Department.
Okay. Skip, it is actually very difficult to hear you as you're going. Can you get a little closer to the mic?
Okay. Is this any better?
It's a little bit muffled and it's difficult to hear. Try it a little closer and let's see how that goes.
Okay. Probably close as I can be at this point, but real quick question. Our president is unhappy with the financial statements that our treasurer is producing. He would like something simpler and more understandable. So are there any suggestions for a particular software that others are using that provides a clearer picture of the financials for a president of the chapter?
Okay. John, go ahead.
Yeah, the financial software that most chapters use is actually the Quicken personal financial software. And the reporting aspects of that allow for as detailed or as condensed reports as you want to design. So I would suggest that your chapter president or secretary get in touch with me, and I can help them design a more condensed report that will still provide useful information to the board. But it does depend on the software that they're using. If they're not using a dedicated accounting program like Quicken, QuickBooks, Peachtree, some of the other relatively easy to use accounting software, if they're using an Excel spreadsheet, that could make it a little more difficult, but we can still make some suggestions along those lines. But I would suggest having them get in touch with me, and we can hopefully work something out with you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, very good. Hey, listen, John, can you do me a favor? And for everyone, can you put your contact info, John, put your contact info into the chat to everyone, or even just to Skip directly, so that you can get in touch. Anyone else have any questions? Doug, do you want to? You actually, I think, had a note here. Let me read. Let me see that. I think that's from you. Do you want to ask your question, Doug?
Hey, John, when you talked about no benefits inuring, so to speak, to any one individual, just out of curiosity, how does that affect, or how does that play out if one of your members of the chapter also happens to be your musical director that gets paid?
That's a different situation. Again, as long as a payment is related to the musical or educational purpose of the chapter, and the person is providing a service for the chapter in exchange for that payment, then it's not really considered a benefit to the payment, to the person. It is a payment for services that are a necessary part of the chapter operations. So yes, chorus director fees, travel to competitions, education, sending them to Harmony University, all of that is a legitimate chapter expense.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Doug. That was a good question, and thanks, John. Anyone else have anything? Ed, William, Rich? There's a phone number I don't recognize. Worth, JC, this session is for you. Go ahead and please don't be bashful. Ask.
If people are calling in and your phone is on mute, you may not know, but the way to unmute your phone is to press *6.
Ah, that's a very good tip. Thank you. There we go.
Hi, this is Bill Mackey from Lewisburg area. One quick question. It was regarding the unrestricted funds to John. This past year, well, past couple of years, we have been part of, our chorus has been part of a benefit concert. It wasn't our show, we were just part of it, and we didn't do a full performance, we just did a couple of songs. But the purpose of that was to raise money for a local food bank in Lewisburg. Now, one of our members graciously put in his own funds to match funds that were collected at this concert, but other guys, other members of the chorus could, if they wanted to, contribute extra money to it. And the point was that, but none of it went to our treasury or anything. That's not a problem, is it?
If it doesn't come through the chapter's bank accounts, then it definitely is not a problem. That's the simple answer to the specific question that you asked.
Okay.
If you keep it outside of the chapter, then no, it's not a problem at all.
Okay. That's all I was concerned about. Thanks.
You're welcome.
A very good question. Thank you. Okay. If there are no other questions, actually, I have a couple of questions, and I'm going to ask for this, if you wouldn't mind coming off of mute, all chapters, all representatives. I'm going to actually ask this about the chapter advocate program for your chapters. The question I have for you is, and this is kind of an informal survey, but while I have you here as a captive audience, I want to know, do you know who your chapter advocate is? And have you seen them recently? If you could help me with that. Just go ahead and fill me in whenever you're ready.
This is Bill Mackey again.
Yep, good, Bill, go.
Yeah, our chapter advocate is Dale Thomas, and actually he sings with the Bloomsburg chapter, but he also comes and sings with us, so we do see him quite regularly, actually.
Very good. Now, do you use him as an advocate? Does he do advocate duties? Okay.
As far as I know, yes. I don't exactly know what his duties are, but he's very helpful when it comes to asking questions about things that deal with show performance and things like that. And I mean, he was a judge years ago as well, I understand. So
got it. Okay.
He's always willing to help us with any advice that we have or questions we have.
Fantastic. That's good. Rich, how about you?
I actually don't know who our advocate is, and we haven't seen him in a while, but I believe that's because our previous advocate passed away, and I don't think anybody new has been assigned yet.
Okay. I'm so sorry to hear that. Do you know, I'm sorry, what chapter?
DC.
DC chapter?
Yes.
All right, good. Okay, JC, someone with the initials JC. I'm guessing not Jesus Christ, but sorry. Okay, Yeah, who's your advocate? Do you know your advocate? Can't hear you. I see you're off mute, but I can't hear you. JC, are you there? Okay. I saw
Hello,
you come
can you
on.
hear me now?
Ah, there you go. Now I can hear you.
Okay, John Collier from Fairfax chapter.
Got it. Okay.
I'm the treasurer, and I don't know anything about the advocate program. If I've heard the term before, it's only in passing, and it doesn't mean much to me. So I'm afraid I can't help you.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Bill, we heard from. Chris, Mad. Who's MAD? And JC, I'm sorry, what chapter did you say you are? Was that Fairfax?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. All right. Ed, 40. Come off of mute. Let me see. Yeah, there you go.
Yes, this is Ed.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm the secretary of the Lewisburg chapter, and Bill Mackey and I work together, and I am aware that Dale has been our advocate for a number of years. And as Bill shared, of course, Dale is the director of the Bloomsburg Chorus, and he is a dual member of our chorus. And he does sit in periodically at our board meetings, just to keep check on us. And we haven't really used his duties too much, but we do know that he's there to help us with any thing that comes up that we are having trouble handling.
Good, that's exactly right. So there's not only the trouble factor, but there's also the, as Doug Brown had said, the cheerleader kind of function as well.
Right, and Dale does do that.
That's awesome.
Many times he will pipe up as a cheerleader and bring things to the chapter that we weren't thinking about. So he does do that for us.
Thank you so much. Skip, how about you?
I do not know who our advocate is. I'm trying to look it up right now on our website, but as of now, I don't know.
Okay. And what chapter are you with?
Westchester Courtman.
Say that one more time.
The Westchester, New York Courtman.
Ah, gotcha. All right, very good. Actually, are you out on Long Island then, right?
No. Westchester County, North of New York.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right. Thank you. Let's see. Steve, I know you're with Bryn Mawr. Steve?
Yes, I'm with Bryn Mawr, and I do not know who our advocate is.
Now, you know Daniel Endy, right? He's been in your chapter, right?
I know him very well.
Yep. He was involved. He is a chapter advocate. I can't remember if he was covering Bryn Mawr or not, but I'm not sure to what degree he has been involved. Cool.
I thought I knew who.
Okay, that's cool. Skip, we hear from Worth. How about yourself?
I was hurrying to try to look it up because I know we have a chapter advocate and I know who he is, but I'm having a senior moment and I can't remember his name.
Got it. What chapter are you?
This is Fauquier County in west of DC in Virginia.
Okay.
And he is around once in a while, but we probably haven't seen him at a chapter function in about a year and a half.
Okay. Yeah, it's
And
sometimes hard.
I'm actually not clear on what the chapter advocate role is.
Role does. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. And then Tree. I guess
Tree is our secretary, my secretary. So
same
we're
answer.
both in the same place. Same answer, I think.
Cool.
Although Tree might remember his name.
Yeah.
I do not remember his name. I don't remember. What was it? 2 years ago, our chapter advocate was at the installation dinner.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is that
right.
correct?
That's right.
That's
him.
Yeah, but I don't remember his name. I did want to make one comment
Sure.
for Rob.
Yes.
I found out about this morning. when Worth sent out an email saying, hey, is anybody going to participate? And because of all the individual addresses, your message went into the spam folder, and I rescued it and quickly downloaded and installed Zoom in my Linux computer and got it up and running about 5 minutes before I signed on. So
got it.
If you can in the future use the MAD, because I have a filter, so anything that says MAD in the heading and was from the mailing list goes sorted out in priority into a barbershop folder for me to act on immediately. And unfortunately, your message got buried in the spam folder and just rescued today.
Got it. That might be the problem that happened to other folks as well. I wonder about that. So thank you. There are other ways too. I think there's a constant contact. I'm not sure if we have an account for that. I think we do, but maybe
you
not.
Do.
I'll look into that. Yeah, cool.
The MAD does, and those messages, although not a lot of them, make it through automatically and get priority. So I also wanted to thank Chris for all his work on that, on the secretary material. I'm a new secretary. I've never been the secretary of anything, and I'm learning, and also learning that different government agencies are switching from paper to online. So I'm transitioning, and his guidance and the guidance in the secretary's manual is great to get me started.
Awesome. This is Worth again. I managed to find an email that tickled my memory. It's Pat Varr out of Fairfax.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. And Chris, kudos to you, as per usual.
Thanks. If I can just pass on a compliment also to John Collier in the Fairfax chapter. I received your Ascap report. Thank you very much for sending it in.
Okay. Okay, cool. So the reason why I was asking that, and I just want to take a few minutes, we're not going to belabor this very, very long. There are two things. One thing is, and it's very, very important to me to help make sure that chapters are connected to the district through their advocate, to make sure they know who their advocate is and they see them on a regular basis. You know, I'm not taking issue with anyone. Travel is sometimes difficult. Hey, we all have lives. We all have our own chapters that we want to be with. But a chapter advocate's role, there's actually, I have a document that sort of is their toolbox and sort of helps them know their role. And that's available actually on the Mid-Atlantic District website on the advocates page. I can show that here for a minute if anyone's interested in that. Let me go ahead and share that while I'm talking here. The role is to be there as a resource to help folks in chapters, help chapter boards wrangle with the problems that they have and to work through it in a rational way. And to connect them with tools or to connect them with other district resources. When I am talking with the advocates a little bit, the training the advocates, helping them know what their role is and what their job is, it's really to be glue, to be the connecting glue, to help make sure that the chapter people can get connected with the other people. There's two things that are important about that. Here's the chapter advocate manual, and I'm not sure if everyone has access to that. This could be a protected page, but it's here. I would like you guys to check that. Let me know if you can get to that. That's one thing. The other thing is, and maybe you guys already know, the who do you call list is also very, very important. One thing chapters don't know sometimes is that there's a resource like this and that anyone really on this list would love to help you out and help your chapter be successful, and to get connected to the right help. If you need help with coaching and directing skills, we have people for that. If you need help with show clearances or other legal questions, we have people for that too. So the advocate's role is to be that kind of the knowledge base or the knowledge resource, and to help that. But I'm going to turn that a little bit, and again, toward what Doug had said earlier about servant leadership. And what servant leadership is all about is placing the customer in the driver's seat, if you will. And to paraphrase, Doug, you've said it much more eloquently, but my take on that is, my read is, to be sure that the customers, that our members are receiving, are being satisfied, that their needs and their wants and their desires are being satisfied in a way that we can satisfy that, right? And so the advocate role is to turn it around, is to make sure that the good stuff that a chapter is doing, and the things that they've worked out. That, some chapters have a great, like they do Ready Set Sing, or they do a great thing with a collaborative project with a nonprofit in their area or something. They've worked out how to do a Youth in Harmony explosion or something. And so those stories to tell are great stories to share, and the advocate helps those stories get out to the right people. It's not a difficult job, but it's one that you have to have a willingness to help. Why I say this and why this is important to me is to get additional advocates. I'm looking for, and why I'm showing this on the screen here is for Northern Division, and this is no fault of Steve. I'm very happy that Steve Skolnick is in the role of District VP, just named recently. There are a number of chapters that do not have advocates, and he's working to get advocates and to train them, and we're sort of searching high and low. I have a similar kind of a situation here in Southern Division, same thing here. These are the advocates. Jerry is newly named to the role. He's also searching for us to get coverage for more chapters. It's a great program. It is sometimes hard to do. So I'm asking everyone here, if you know someone who maybe might be a good advocate, someone that could not counsel, but be, come alongside of a chapter, who maybe has been in the hobby and has been at the board level and understands how chapter boards work. I would love to know their names, and I would love to follow up with them. I would love for you to arrange an introduction through email. I think that's all the content I have. I'll just comment one thing. I'm not sure if you guys see, we have someone new joining. So for today, let's see, Doug, do you have any closing comments for the group? Yep.
I would just like to thank the folks that came on. If you have any questions about what I talked about, I realized that I was trying to cover hours worth of content and still keeping it under the 14 minutes that I had promised Rob. So I was really using that as kind of sowing some seeds. But if anything along those lines you want clarification, or if you said, wow, this was kind of interesting, can we go into depth on that? Please send me an email. I'll be more than happy to set up a phone call and talk you through it and answer your specific questions.
Cool. Thank you. Okay. Very good. And Chris, do you have any closing comments? Maybe mute. Do you need help with mute? Chris? There you go. Are you there? Okay. And then John, do you have any closing comments?
No, I'll just echo what Doug said. The treasurer's class at Leadership Academy generally runs about 4.5 hours of hands-on time, specifically with the treasurers. So if your treasurer hasn't been to that at all, or in the past 3 or 4 years, I would highly recommend coming to one of the on-site sessions when they're available, or the expanded online sessions as we make more use of this tool but the individual material in the treasurer's area is much more detailed, and the questions and answers are much more interactive in the sense of learning from what your peers are doing in similar situations.
Very good. Thank you, John. So I would like to then close this off. Someone named PSTER, I know you just joined. I want you to hang on for a second. I'm going to, in a moment, dismiss the gallery here, but hang on just for 1 second. So first of all, thank you, Doug and Chris and John, for joining us tonight. I am very happy that you have made yourselves available for the Mid-Atlantic District. You always come through and you have great content and you have a great message and a great story to tell. And I'm honored that you've been able to be here. Everyone in the gallery, thank you again for being here and for what you do for your chapters. Sometimes it's certainly not a praiseworthy job. Sometimes you don't get thanked. Sometimes you get slapped more, or it feels like you get slapped more than you get thanked. But just know that you're doing a very vital role, and I thank you for stepping up and being that secretary, being the treasurer, being the president.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. I finally found the unmute button.
Ah, there you are, Chris.
Keep moving. I discovered I had 7 screens open on the computer.
Thank you, Chris.
In any event, my contact information is spread in several places on the district website.
Yep.
If anybody has any questions.
All right, so with that, I think we can dismiss, and we will be scheduling another one of these, if I count on my fingers, from now, if I do this quarterly. Today's in February, so that'll be March, April, May. Look for this coming up in May sometime. Now, May is a busy month for us. I know we have, division conventions coming up, so